Okay, now we've identified the customer type, we've prepared for the customer's visit, the customer's come through the door and we've greeted them in a positive, consistent manner, and we've shown them that we're ready for them. We've got the pre-printed repair order and the service history and the preventative maintenance schedule. Now they're going to present to us why they're here today. I would like to have you think about something. When they walk up to this terminal, and maybe you don't recognize them, have you ever found yourself saying to that customer, "Do you have an appointment today?" It's pretty common, right? In my travels, I know when I get to a hotel, they'll often look at me and say, "Do you have a reservation?" Well, what message does that send? Do you have an appointment today? You don't mean, "Do you have an appointment today?" You as a service writer mean, "Am I going to find you in my system? Am I going to find you on my schedule?" Right? That's what you mean. But to a customer, when you approach them with, "Do you have an appointment today?" that can be seen as a real negative. They might be thinking, this person doesn't know who I am. Or they're not really ready for me. Or do I need one? If you went to a restaurant tonight to get dinner with your wife, family, significant other, whatever it may be, and you walk into that restaurant and the hostess greets you and says to you, "Do you have a reservation?" What's your immediate assumption? What's your knee-jerk reaction to, "Do you have a reservation?" And I'm guessing at least some of you thought, "Oh, I'm not getting in here tonight. I'm not eating here tonight. I need a reservation." So if I ask this customer, "Do you have an appointment today?" the message I'm sending is, you need an appointment. You don't have an appointment, you ain't getting in. Just think about that. Because you don't mean, "Do you have an appointment?" You mean, "Am I going to find you in this system?" So how else can you approach this? I might ask what their name is. "Good afternoon. May I ask your last name?" Because if the customer doesn't have an appointment and you ask their last name, what's the next thing out of their mouth? They might say to you, "Smith, but I don't have an appointment." That sent an entirely different message, didn't it? "May I ask your last name?" Now they're giving you the information they don't have an appointment. And there's no more assumptions associated with negativity. So just think about how you're greeting the customer. Smile, be positive, ask them for their name. Don't necessarily ask them if they have an appointment. Now, when they present the reason they're there today, the work that they need to have done or they perceive they need to have done, that's when I encourage you to come out from behind this terminal and stand in a position much like this so that you can talk with this customer over here. It forces you to actually engage the customer. It forces you into active listening. What is active listening? There's a big difference between being back here, staring at this computer terminal, typing away, and being here. So describe this problem to me. Describe what you're experiencing. That feels different, doesn't it? Watch. All right, what are you experiencing? What are you here for today? Okay, bucking at 30 miles an hour? Okay. Compared to, so explain to me your drivability challenge here. When do you experience it? When does it happen? Feels different, doesn't it? Okay? Active listening is engaging the customer. It's making eye contact, getting away from this barrier, because this is a physical barrier. The other thing this does is the customer can't see what's being typed over here, do they? They have no idea if you're translating what they're saying to this computer terminal. If you're out here, and maybe you've got a copy of the repair order right here, or you've got a multi-point inspection sheet, or you've got some documentation that you can write on, they can see what you're writing, and they then know that you are listening to them, that you are writing down what they say. So practice active listening. Active listening is making eye contact, reducing barriers if you can, and it's expressing empathy, like, wow, that must be kind of nerve-wracking, huh? Now, empathy in this case helps build the relationship. We'll talk about empathy later on in dealing with disgruntled customers, another important tool. Head nodding can really help. Okay, I see. Here's the funny thing about head nodding. and I mentioned it in the first DVD, Service Management Made Simple. Head nodding can be overdone. If you nod your head too much, it can be really overdone. But if you're explaining your problem to me, and I'm looking you in the eye, and I'm saying, yeah, okay, all right, so I think I understand that. Head nodding sends a feeling of affirmation. You're affirming that what they're saying really does work. Sounds silly, but it's an important tool. And then the last tool that I want you to use during this write-up process, as you're gathering that information, as the customer is presenting their challenge to you, or whatever they're there for that day, is don't ever make assumptions. Some call it diagnosing on the drive. Just because a customer walks in today and says, I've got a howling noise at 45 miles an hour, and you had a customer last week with the same vehicle that needed a rear wheel bearing, don't assume it needs a rear wheel bearing today. And certainly don't say that to the customer. Just collect the information. Now, assumptions also get into clarifying what they're saying to you. Because I may say something to you and you translate it in your mind very differently than I mean it. I would strongly suggest to you that when the customer presents information to you, that you repeat it back to them. So what I'm hearing you say, Mr. Johnson, is that at 45 miles an hour, you hear a howling noise from the rear of the vehicle. And he can say, yes, that's exactly what it is. Or, well, no, it's not. Well, it might be higher than 45 miles an hour, but it's more of a squealing noise, I guess. Okay, so Mr. Johnson, what I'm hearing you say is that at 45 miles an hour and above, you hear a squealing noise. Yeah, that's pretty good. So what I've done is I haven't just taken what they've said. I've elaborated on it a little bit. I've made sure that the customer and I understand each other so that I get the right information on whatever sheet I'm collecting it on. And we're going to talk next about using a customer problem analysis sheet to gather that information. So in summary, greet the customer in a positive manner, greet them in a friendly manner, come out from behind this terminal, ask them their name instead of asking if they have an appointment today, come out from behind the terminal, engage the customer, actively listen, use head nodding, use eye contact, and clarify what they're saying to you. Next section, we'll talk about a really, really useful tool to help gather that information. Up next. Okay, so now that we've identified customer type and we've prepared for the visit and we greeted them when they walked through the door, we've found them in the system and we've engaged them actively as part of the write-up process, I want to talk to you about a really, really important and useful tool that you can implement tomorrow at absolutely no cost that will help you gather important customer information. It's also a tool that you can use with those Quadrant 1 customers that are waiting in line to send the message that we care, we recognize you want to get out of here quickly. And that is the Customer Problem Analysis Sheet. Now, for those of you that have the book, Service Management Made Simple, on page 185, you'll find an example of the Customer Problem Analysis Sheet. Feel free to contact me if you want the full 8.5 by 11 version of it. I'll be happy to send it to you. You can create your own based on what you find in that book. Every major engine repair database, or I should say vehicle repair database, such as AllData and OnDemand, etc., has one of these customer problem analysis sheets somewhere in their diagnostic section. They usually have individual ones for check engine light diagnosis or noise diagnosis or drivability diagnosis. The challenge I have with some of those sheets is they can get really, really long. They collect a lot of information, but in my opinion, no service writer in their right mind is going to sit up here and gather all that information with the customer. I prefer something that is one side of one sheet so that you can get the simple, important information and expand upon it if you need to. But the Customer Problem Analysis Sheet does a number of things for you. It's, first of all, a tool to gather information. Secondly, it's a tool to help engage the customer. If I stand here with the customer and I say, okay, Mr. Customer, I understand you have a drivability problem. Let's see if we can gather some information from you so that I can share it with the technician and make a quicker, more accurate diagnosis. And this sheet has on it questions to ask the customer. Some have check boxes, some have fill in the blanks so the customer can give notes. You can either fill it out with the customer, which I prefer because that's a customer engagement tool. Customers like to feel like they're part of the process. It helps them feel more control. It helps them with that anxiety and that out of control feeling when they walk through the door and their car's going to go out there and they have nothing to do with it. So use it as that engagement tool. Now, experienced service writers know many of the questions on that sheet to ask. And the point is not that you don't know to ask the question. The point is, on any given day, every one of us forgets to ask certain things, or we don't think of it, or maybe it hasn't come up in 6 months. So it's a reminder for you to ask those questions. It also helps jog the customer's memory. As they're filling it out, they might think of associations, or they might think of, oh yeah, you know what, it does do it then. And they can check that box of, over 50 miles an hour, or when it's raining out. So use it to gather information, use it to engage the customer, and you can use it with those quadrant 1 customers to say, here sir, or ma'am, fill this out for me. We'll get you out of here quicker. We just want to make sure we have good information from you for a faster, more accurate diagnosis. I strongly encourage you to use a customer problem analysis sheet. Now, when you use it, there is one question that didn't get on the sheet that's in this book, and that was my bad. The one question that I would encourage you to ask, that I always ask every single customer that I'm filling out one of those sheets for, is this. Mr. or Mrs. Customer, is there anything, no matter how crazy it sounds, that you associate with this problem? See, I was in a repair situation one day where after 5 repair attempts, the shop still was unable to verify the customer's complaint. And the complaint was the car stalls going down the road. You see, nobody had used a customer problem analysis sheet. Nobody had even taken the time with the customer to ask her a number of questions. When I start filling out the customer problem analysis sheet with the customer and asking all these questions, there was nothing real obvious in her answers that would lead us to that condition. But when I asked her, ma'am, is there anything, no matter how crazy it sounds, that you associate with this problem? She looks me in the eye and she says, you're going to think I'm crazy. Well, what does that say to you? It says to me, there is something. And it also says to me, she isn't telling anybody because she doesn't believe it herself and she doesn't want to appear crazy to the service writer. So I said, well, what is it? And she says, I believe it's every time I turn left. Now, let me get this straight. Your car stalls every time you turn left? We're at the 5th repair attempt over 3 months. And she's telling me it stalls every time she turns left. And she says, well, no, probably not every time I turn left, but 3 or 4 times a day. Now I had something, didn't I? She's telling me that 3 or 4 times a day when she turns left, her car stalls. And yet nobody's ever been able to confirm this. It enabled us, asking that question and recording that information on the customer problem analysis sheet, enabled us to take that vehicle down the road, turn left, and have the car stall. Well, why did nobody ever do that before? Nobody did that before because in the industry, many technicians were taught to only take right-hand turns on their test drives. It's an insurance thing. No right-hand turn, only right-hand turns, no left-hand turns, you're never cutting across traffic. Test drives are faster, test drives are safer. Technicians and I, on my first test drive, only took right-hand turns. None of us ever took a left-hand turn. So use that customer problem analysis sheet to gather important information, to engage the customer, and to handle your quadrant 1 customers. All right, fair enough. Check it out, page 185 in the book. We'll be back in a minute. So we've discussed customer types. We've discussed trying to get to the trust portion of that pyramid. We've discussed what to do before and after the customer comes walking through your door, and gathering information, greeting and engaging the customer, using the customer problem analysis sheet. Now, I think it's appropriate that we talk about selling here, because whether I'm going to sell to the customer right here at the counter before they walk away, or whether I'm going to sell to the customer after we diagnose the vehicle out in the shop, it's the same skill set. So let's talk about what sales is. See, a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, hey, can you teach me to sell? Do you have any classes on selling skills? Well, okay, sure, I can teach you to sell. But let's talk first about what is sales. And I would suggest to you that sales is really knowledge. You choose to purchase a product based on certain knowledge about the product. You don't just walk into a store willy-nilly and buy something off the shelf, get out to the car and go, "What was this? I don't like this," and go back in and buy something else, right? And just try it. You gather knowledge ahead of time. You read the marketing piece, you read the advertising piece, you read the description piece. You're gathering knowledge to choose what to buy. Now here's the challenge in our industry at this counter. When that customer comes walking through the door, because of that industry reputation and because of that anxiety level they're on the defensive, aren't they? They're expecting to get sold something. Because the reputation is, whenever I go in there, they sell me something. And usually it's they've sold me something I don't need. So how do we get around that? Well, we get around that with knowledge, right? We get around that with knowledge. So you need to, as a service writer, in order to successfully sell work and make money and make your store profitable, you need to impart knowledge to your customer. All right, great. Now, what kind of tools do we have to impart knowledge? Sometimes as a service writer, you know enough to verbally impart knowledge to the customer. Other times, you don't know enough to impart that knowledge. So we need a number of tools here. It's not one tool or two tools, it's a whole toolbox full of tools to improve your sales. But remember, think of sales as knowledge. Let's talk about the first tool, preventative maintenance menus. The benefit of menus, whether it's preventative maintenance or service menus or whatever your store or your operation may provide, the benefit of menus is that it allows the customer to choose. It gives control to the customer. When they come walking through the door, they're expecting you to sell them something. If instead you give them knowledge, for instance, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, here is the preventative maintenance schedule that the manufacturer of your vehicle recommends. The importance in preventative maintenance and in performing preventative maintenance is that A, it keeps your warranty valid. So you stay within the warranty of the vehicle, which is very important. It also reduces long-term repair costs because it keeps your vehicle running properly for a longer period of time and avoids breakdowns. So here are the mileage intervals that they recommend, and here are the services that they recommend. Is there anything here that you'd like to do today? By asking them if there's anything there that they'd like to do today, based on your recommendations, you've given them the control. Now all of a sudden, they feel like, oh, well, the choice is mine. And that's really, really important because mentally, psychologically, they don't feel like you just sold them something. They feel like they just chose something. Big, big difference. The control was there. It wasn't pushed on them. The control was there within them. They could choose. Okay? So think about using menus if you don't already. Really, really important. What other tools do we have to impart knowledge and give choice? Some of the other tools, show and tell we spoke about. Show and tell is a really important knowledge tool. Many people are visual processors. They need to see or they need to hear if they're audio processors. They need to see what's wrong. They need to understand the parts involved, what this looks like. Maybe so they can describe it later, maybe just so they can process it in their own mind. So show and tell really works. Here's a challenge with show and tell. It takes time to take them out to the shop. It takes you away from the counter. It provides them the opportunity to meet the technician, which is great, but all this takes time. And it doesn't always work. If I were to sell you a timing belt, how do I explain to you what the timing belt does? And it's an example I use very often because if you walk up to me and I say, well, sir or ma'am, you're due for a timing belt. And you go, well, what do I need to do that for? And I say, well, the timing belt connects the top of the engine with the bottom of the engine. It goes round and round, and if it breaks, you're left stranded on the side of the road. That sounds like a sales pitch, doesn't it? Because I put fear in them. They get left stranded on the side of the road. And they may go, you know what? He's trying to scare me. I'm not going to do it. I sure as heck can't walk out to the shop and say, hey, Mr. Technician, will you rip this timing cover off this vehicle so I can show the customer what the timing belt looks like? You don't have time to do that, right? That's not cost effective. So what tools do you have at your disposal to impart that knowledge? Well, I'm willing to bet your technicians can come up with a camshaft pulley or a crankshaft pulley, an old timing belt, a new timing belt. You can visually, physically show the customer what these parts look like. Show them an old timing belt. Show them one that's cracked and about to break. Show them one that did break. If I show them one that broke and say, look, this customer waited a little bit too long, here's what happened, engine wouldn't run, this is what we're trying to prevent, all of a sudden they go, yeah, okay. Now it's a system that you can't just walk them out to the car and show them, okay? So use physical parts if you can. You can use pictures, you can use diagrams. There are electronic programs out there with really cool animations that different parts companies have available. I suggest that you go to your parts distributors or parts representatives and ask them, what do you have that would help me explain this to a customer? Do you have laminated flip charts? Do you have posters we can put on the wall? Do you have animations I can play on my computer terminal? Use these tools to impart knowledge to the customer. In the next segment, we're going to talk about a really, really important sales tool, and that is the multi-point inspection form. It is used to both impart knowledge and build a relationship. So between now and then, just be thinking about what sales tools you have, what selling tools you have at your disposal to use in building the relationship with the customer and imparting knowledge with them. More to come. Now that we've been discussing building trust with our customers in an effort to increase customer labor sales, right? Getting that additional half hour per repair order. And the pyramid we discussed, the customer satisfaction pyramid, where the exceptional service experience is down bottom, plus the fix right first time gives us trust. And customer type, of course, so that we identify who's walking through the door and up to our counter. We prepared for their visit. We engage them at the counter. Maybe we use the customer problem analysis sheet to help engage them. I want to talk now about service counter selling. Because whether we're selling to the customer right now or whether we're going to bring the vehicle into the shop, diagnose it, and then sell to the customer, the skill set's basically the same. So let's talk about what selling is. People come to me and they say, hey, do you have any seminars on selling? Well, sure, but let me ask you this. What is selling? And what do you want to learn? I mean, what do you want to know? Certainly there's sales process. But let's back up a step and think about what sales really is. Some people would tell you sales is a relationship. And I would agree with that. I would ask this though. Why did you buy whatever you bought last? Even if it was a bottle of soda. Why did you buy that soda? Did you not have knowledge about that soda? Did you not know what the soda tasted like? Did you not know what the soda would do for you? Did you not know you liked the soda? You had knowledge about that soda, right? Knowledge is where sales come from. So in that light, using that framework, let's talk about the transaction that goes on up here. When that customer comes through your door, the industry reputation is in their mind. The fact that this is an inconvenient thing to do is in their mind. And the fact that they're a little bit out of control might be in their mind. Remember, they need you, right? They can't do it themselves. So they're coming through that door to this counter and they need you, and it's going to cost them some money. They have to pay to need you. And they're expecting to get sold something. And I hear it all the time. Whenever my dad takes his car into that oil change place, they always sell him something he doesn't need. Well, why is there that perception that they sold him something he doesn't need? Maybe there's a lack of knowledge. The lack of knowledge that he really did need that. So we need to impart knowledge to our customers. Knowledge as to why they need to purchase something, why it's necessary or why it's recommended. What tools do you have at your disposal in your shop to impart that knowledge to your customers? There's a ton of different tools available to you. And you can't just use one or two. You got to use the whole toolbox of tools to impart knowledge to your customers. We discussed earlier, in an earlier segment, show and tell. And how for some customer types, show and tell is really, really powerful. You bring them out to the shop and you provide them knowledge as to here's what your problem is, look at it. Here's what it's supposed to look like, look at it. Here's what we're going to make your car look like. Now, the customer, especially the visual learners, understand they have a picture. Bad, good, bad, good. Good, this is what my car's gonna look like. They have the knowledge to decide whether they want to buy or not. Now, the second tool that you have at your disposal are maintenance menus. Think about it like this. Customer walks through the door, they feel very out of control, right? They feel like the control is not theirs. They need you. You present something like a preventative maintenance menu, or maybe it's a separate service maintenance menu board that you have, or a video display that you have. You present them with a menu, and you give them knowledge about that menu. For instance, preventative maintenance. Sir, this is the preventative maintenance recommended by the manufacturer of your vehicle. You have approximately this many miles on your vehicle. Here's what the manufacturer recommends. By doing this, you help keep your vehicle within warranty, you avoid long-term repair costs, and you extend the longevity of your vehicle. You just give them knowledge, didn't you? You give them knowledge, and now what can they do? Now you can turn that right around and you can say, would you like to do any of this today? And by asking them, you've just turned that control back to them, haven't you? Now you've put the ball back in their court, and they can look at that menu, they have the knowledge as to what it is and why it is, and they can decide. You gave them control. Anytime you can give the customer the control over the choice of what to purchase, you're going to have a sale. You're going to have a sale. Oftentimes they'll buy everything because they don't want to appear cheap, maybe. Sometimes they'll pick and choose based on their budget. And we'll talk more about that in the next segment. What other tools do you have to help with sales? If sales are knowledge, or sales is knowledge, maybe, what tools do you have to impart knowledge? Show and tell, maintenance menus, what else? Well, what about when show and tell doesn't work? Timing belt is the example I always use. Customers due for a timing belt. Maybe based on mileage, maybe based on an engine noise that you hear. And explaining to them what a timing belt is. Connects the top of the engine to the bottom of the engine, goes round and round, doesn't run without it. Isn't enough. That doesn't really give a good picture. It's accurate, but it doesn't give a good picture. And you can't go out and remove a timing cover to show them because that's just impractical from a financial standpoint, a time standpoint. What do? Well, maybe you have parts. Maybe you have a used timing belt you could show them. You could show them a new versus an old timing belt. You could show them the camshaft sprocket, the crankshaft sprocket, and how the belt connects the two. Give them a visual. I've seen shops with parts carts with new and old parts on them so that you could pick those parts up and show the customer. They might not want to touch them because they're perceived as dirty, whether they are or not, but you can physically show them. And they get a visual image of it. You're imparting knowledge to that customer. The customer understands when they see, and they're more likely to purchase. What other tools do you have? Well, parts distributors and parts suppliers have all kinds of things at their disposal to demonstrate parts, both good and bad, and worn and not worn, etc. Ask your parts representatives what tools they have available. Some have really cool animations that you can play on your terminal right there at the counter and explain to a customer, here's an image of a timing belt, here's the engine turning, here's your belt, here's what it does. You're imparting knowledge. Knowledge truly is power when it comes to sales. So I strongly encourage you to think outside the box about what tools you have at your disposal around your facility to impart that knowledge to your customers. Now in the next segment we're going to talk about a really, really important tool, and that's the multi-point inspection form. And that's not only a sales tool, but it's also a relationship tool. So stay tuned for that. So continuing the discussion about service counter selling and how selling is really imparting knowledge to customers, there's a very, very important tool that I want to discuss with you right now, and that is the multi-point inspection form. Now, when I raise the multi-point inspection form in a lot of my seminars, if it's technicians in a seminar, they really recoil at the thought of it. Service writers tend to be split. Some really strongly dislike multi-point inspection forms, or what I call MPIs, and others see them as an awesome tool. I would encourage you to think of multi-point inspection forms as a relationship building tool. it does a number of things for you as a relationship building tool. And if it's going to be successful or it's going to be used successfully, there's certain key features that you need to emphasize, and there's certain rules, if you will, to using one. Now, the first thing is always present it to the customer. Whether you have a 52-point inspection, a 20-point inspection, a 48-point inspection, doesn't matter to me. Whatever your MPI form is, it is. But always present it to the customer. Because the last thing you want, or the thing you really want to avoid, is bringing a vehicle in for, say, an oil change and having the customer walk around on a nice day out in the lot, look in and see that somebody's got the front wheels off their vehicle. Because maybe your policy is to remove the front wheels to inspect the brakes as part of your MPI. And the customer then says, "What are you doing? I'm paying for an oil change, you get the wheels off my car." If you present the MPI first, up front, with an explanation as to what it is, why you do it, and that there's no obligation, oftentimes they'll say yes. If they say no thank you, that's okay also. Just make a note either on the repair order or in the system so that you know that the customer declined having their vehicle inspected. So that's the first key to using an MPI successfully. The next key to using an MPI successfully is to explain to the technicians why you use the multi-point inspection form. Technicians often see it as just another piece of paper that gets in the way of their doing their job on a daily or a minute-by-minute basis. They don't always think big picture. They don't understand that you're building a relationship with your customer. Have the conversation with them that it's a very important selling tool for you. Now, to emphasize the importance of the MPI, you have got to give the technician some feedback. Because here's what I see happen. You present it to the customer. Customer says, "Okay, let's do it." It goes back to the shop with the technician. Technician is diligent about filling it out. They do a fantastic job. They give you all the information you need. Maybe they even give you times and prices on it. Perfect. It comes back up to the desk. They go back to their bay, all right, to finish whatever work they're doing. You present it to Mr. or Mrs. Customer, and the customer says, "Ooh, I can't do that today. I can't afford that. I don't have time," whatever it is. And the next thing you should do when you get that objection is, "Well, would you like to make an appointment to have it done in the future? Next week, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, whatever it is." Customer says, yeah, let's do that. So you make the appointment. You get it in your system. You get it on your schedule pad. You go back out there and you say to the technician, "Throw the wheels back on it. Customer's got to go." What's the technician thinking? Technician's thinking, "I just presented this multi-point inspection form to my service writer. It needed $1,200 worth of work, and he's telling me, put the wheels on and get it out of here." He or she's useless. They couldn't sell anything. Why do I even bother doing this? Customer's not buying. Customers never buy. Well, the technician doesn't know you just had an appointment made. There's an appointment on the schedule pad now. If you took the 10, 15, 30 seconds it would take to walk through that door right there to the shop and say to the technician, "Hey, thanks for doing an awesome job. I sold the work. They couldn't do it today, but they made an appointment in 3 weeks to get it done. I'll make sure you get the work." What's the technician know now? Technician knows now that their effort was not wasted, that their effort's going to be rewarded. It's not today, it's a few weeks down the line. Now, the other argument you get from technicians is, "I don't get paid to do that." Well, they do. And if they understand that you sold that work and the customer's coming back and that you're going to make sure they get that work, they can also understand they did get paid to do that because they just sold, whatever it was, 3, 4, 8 hours worth of work on that MPI that's going to come back to them in 3 weeks. And by having the conversation, by providing the feedback to the technician and closing that loop, you will encourage technicians to do a better job on multi-point inspection forms. So think about that. You're going to present the inspection form to the customer. You're going to give the technician feedback on the customer's decision. And then you're going to use this MPI to help build the relationship further with the customer. What if that customer that was presented with a $1,200 MPI, so the estimate was $1,200, the work that they needed, and they look at you and they go, "Ooh, wow, can't afford to do that." Well, you know what the problem is with the expense of owning an automobile? The problem is that the customer came to us today for a $35 oil change, and we presented a $1,200 estimate to them. The money wasn't the problem. They might understand they needed the work. The problem was they don't have the money today. It wasn't in the budget. It was unexpected. Remember, what the customer expects or doesn't expect is just as important as what they do expect. They didn't expect $1,200. They expected a $35 bill. So how do you help the customer with that? Well, instead of saying, wow, you need $1,200 worth of work, technician found a lot of stuff wrong with your car, you should get this done as soon as possible. And have the customer go, no, I'm here for an oil change, I think that's all I'll do today. Impart knowledge. Explain what the technician found. Prioritize it for the customer. What are the safety-related things? The really important things that they need to have done now, or tomorrow, or the next day. And then, what things can we put off a little bit? Or what things can we spread out over a longer period of time? You're doing a number of things by doing this. First of all, you're showing the customer you care. You're helping the customer make a decision. They don't know what you know. They don't have the knowledge they need to make that decision as to what's priority and what's not. So you help them. That assistance does not go unnoticed. The next thing you do is you're helping them budget. Because now that they know the priority and you pre-schedule an appointment for them, they know exactly when they need how much money for. Now when they walk through that door, yeah, they're going to knock off that $400 piece today, or that $600 piece today, or that $100 piece tomorrow. They can budget for those repairs. You've helped them make that decision. You've helped them budget for those repairs. You've pre-scheduled for them. Now, what does pre-scheduling and prioritizing do for you? Keeps them coming back. It ensures, especially the pre-scheduling part, it ensures they're coming back to you, to your shop. Instead of, I can't do it today. Okay, here's your bill, your invoice for the work we did today, $35 for the oil change. Letting them go. Let us know when you want to make an appointment. Now you let them out the door with no pre-scheduled appointment. They could be driving down the road 2 weeks from now. They've got an extra $100,000 or $200,000 in their pocket, and they see a shop that's open, and they go, oh, you know what? I needed tires soon. Hey, that guy looks open. I'm going to go over there. If you had pre-scheduled their appointment for 3, 4, however much time ahead, they'd be driving down the road and they go, shops, oh, no, you know what? I have an appointment at that other shop next week. You are far more likely to get them to return to you. And the more often they return to you, the better relationship you're going to build with them. And the better relationship you build with them, the closer you get to trust, the increase in sales that you'll see will be fantastic. The number of touches you have with a customer over a period of time is very, very important. Normally, customers you'll see them what, 3, 4 times a year, maybe? But if you prioritize on a multi-point inspection form and you get 4 visits out of that on top of those 3 or 4 a year, now all of a sudden you've got that customer coming to your store at least every other month, if not every month. And you have a better chance of building that relationship, growing your revenue, growing your customer labor sales, and growing your profits. So I strongly encourage you to consider using a multi-point inspection form. Remember, present it to the customer, give the technician feedback, and prioritize for the customer. Those are the 3 keys to selling with a multi-point inspection form. Coming up next, we'll talk about one more tool. So in the last segment, I promised you one more tool to help you with service counterselling. And I'm actually going to give you 2 in this segment. The first tool is something that I think is vastly overlooked when it comes to selling, and that is asking for the sale. Do you know how few people actually ask for the sale? Maybe you yourself have actually walked out of a store because nobody asked you for the sale. True story that happened to me. I went into a large box store to buy a television one day. I had $300 I was going to spend on a TV. $300. And I walk into that TV aisle and I was greeted by a sales representative. They, of course, didn't know I was coming, but they greeted me when I was there. They engaged me, like we talked about right here at the counter. They engaged me. They actively listened to me. And the gentleman walked me over to the $1,200 TVs to show me the features and benefits of that. And I went, wow, that's pretty cool, but no, I got $300. Well, by the time that this gentleman was done with me, I was drooling over the $800 TV. I was ready to buy. And the person looks at me and he says to me, "Is there anything else I can help you with?" And I said, "Nope, I think I'm all set." He says, "I'll be over here if you need anything." And he walked away. I took one look at the $300 one, I took one look at the $1,200 one, I looked one last time at the $800 one, and I walked out of the store. And I got out to the parking lot and I thought, whew, I almost spent $800. Wow, that was close. And then I started thinking, you know, all that person had to do was say, "If I've got one in stock, do you want to take it with you?" Or, "I can help you carry it to the car." That's all they had to do. And I would have parted with my money. I had enough knowledge to choose which one I wanted, and I was willing to spend the money. And yet nobody asked me for the sale. So what keeps people from asking for the sale? And when I ask this in my seminars, the number one answer I get is fear of rejection. Okay, I believe that. That's fine. But where does the fear of rejection come from? I mean, what are you afraid of? If you walk in here and I present a $1,200 estimate on a multi-point inspection form to you, and I say, "Would you like to do this work today?" Where's the rejection? No? No, I wouldn't. Okay, so how do I overcome that objection? How about we prioritize the $1,200? We'll break out what's immediate, what we can wait a little bit to do, and we'll make you a couple of appointments. We'll schedule you a couple of appointments. That way you can budget for it, sir. Is that not asking for the sale? It is. It's doing two things. It's asking for the sale and overcoming whatever objections the customer has. But you've got to first of all ask for the sale. And you can do both at the same time. For instance, I was in a conversation with a representative of a we'll call him a large retail service operation. And he says to me, "You know, the thing that frustrates me is I watch my associates, when the customer walks through the door and says, 'I want this tire,' for example, and it's what we've advertised, and the associate says, 'Okay, I'll get those for you.' Instead of walking the customer over to the tire selection and saying, 'Let me ask you what you have on your car right now. Are you happy with it? Are you aware of the other alternatives? I have this tire in stock that we've advertised, but let's make sure it's the tire that you want first.'" And then when they walk them over to explain the features and benefits of that specific tire that they think the customer might like, and the customer is standing there staring, all they've got to ask is, "What do you think?" Right? What do you think? I present a $1,200 estimate on a multi-point inspection form, and I say, "What do you think? Is there any of this work you'd like to have done right now?" Or I say, "If I could bring your vehicle in right now and do some of this, would you like to do that?" You're asking the customer for the sale, and you're asking them for input. You want to know what's going on in here, don't you? You want to know what's going on in their head. Because if you don't know what they're thinking, you can't overcome that objection. So remember, ask for the sale, and then, if you can, do it in such a manner that you understand what their objection is, whether it's money, time, etc., features and benefits. And then you can help overcome that objection to the sale. Now, the second tool I'm going to give you. Psychologists have known for years that there's tremendous power in a signature. They've been studying this since the late 1800s, believe it or not. You collect that signature on the repair order every time that customer comes to the counter. When I ask most service writers why they collect it, they say it's for legal reasons. Okay, it is. It is. It gives you permission to operate the vehicle. But there's a more powerful benefit when it comes to service counter selling of that signature. You see, if you put your signature on a piece of paper, you are far more likely to commit to whatever that piece of paper was than if you never sign it. Think about all the sign and drive programs that there are in the industry. What do you think that's about? Those manufacturers know that if you walk into whatever dealership that is and you put your signature on a piece of paper that they'll just say is a waiver, and it is a waiver, but you've given them your signature. They know that you are far more likely to actually purchase that product than if you just walk into that dealership and say, "Can I go for a test drive?" So collecting a signature on every single repair order is actually a sales tool that you can use to get a commitment from a customer. and you can drive your CLS up, your customer labor sales up, by using that tool. So keep that in mind. Ask for the sale so that you can then overcome objections and get a signature on every single repair order. All right, coming up, we've got a lot more. Stay with us. In this segment, I want to discuss something very closely related to service counter selling, and that is estimating. And there's three aspects to estimating that I'd like to mention here. The first aspect is what goes wrong with estimates and how customers perceive estimates. The second thing is how you can more accurately create estimates in your repair shop. And lastly, check engine light estimates. So first, what goes wrong with estimates? Okay, there's a lot of things that go wrong with estimates, right? The technician underestimated the amount of time it would take, as in the repair takes longer than expected. The parts were estimated improperly. Maybe you got the wrong price for a part, or there were more parts needed than what you expected. Something breaks during the repair that was unexpected. Lack of diligence during the initial inspection creates some challenges. Maybe a poor diagnosis creates some challenges. So these are all things that can go wrong with an estimate. What is an estimate to the customer? Or maybe you think about it the other way around. What is an estimate to you? You see, when I ask groups in my seminars, I'll go around the room and I'll say, what is an estimate to you? You know, give me your definition of an estimate. And I get all kinds of different answers, right? Well, it's easier to answer what is an estimate to a customer. Because to a customer, an estimate is a price tag. It is what that repair is going to cost, period. It is walking into the clothing store and buying a t-shirt for, whatever, $15. You and I, in the industry, we understand that that estimate is essentially a best guess. It's an estimate based on our current knowledge of what is wrong and what it will take to repair the vehicle. And you may want to present it to the customer as that. Based on our current knowledge, this is what we estimate your repair will require in terms of parts and in terms of money. So the customer understands that this is based on your current knowledge and it isn't necessarily a price tag. Everybody has some way of getting around this, right? And when I ask my seminar groups, a lot of times they'll say, well, I present the worst case scenario to the customer, just in case the brake job needs a caliper. Okay, but the issue I have with that is if you present a $250 estimate to me and then you say, if we discover that you need calipers, Mr. Customer, it's going to be an additional $200 each side for a total of, $850, I might go, oh, okay, well, there's no way they're not going to need those calipers, so you're basically telling me I need $850 worth of work. Well, that may work for some customers, but other customers may see that as, you know what, my price tag is $850 and I don't like that. So you may talk yourself right out of the sale. To me, the best way of estimating for your customers is to say, based on our current knowledge of what the problem is and the parts we need to resolve this issue, here's what we're looking at for dollars. Okay, does that make sense? Now, when it comes to check engine light estimating, that's a big can of worms, right? When that car comes in and the check engine light is on, to the customer, it's a light that's on that needs to go out. To you, there could be 300 possibilities for why that light is on. What I tell technicians in our technical classes is bring that vehicle in. If it's a red light, figure out what the problem is. Red lights are usually brake lights, oil lights. It doesn't take a whole lot of time or effort to figure out what the problem is with a red light on the dash. If it's an orange or yellow light, retrieve diagnostic trouble codes, DTCs, for free, because that takes no time to do, and then upsell 1 hour of diagnostic time. So check engine light estimates should always, always, always begin with 1 hour of diagnostic time. Here's your responsibility. You upsell that 1 hour of diagnostic time, and that vehicle goes out to the repair shop, gets turned out to the technician. Many technicians are like bulldogs. They sink their teeth into something, they don't let go. That means they don't look at their watch. You, whether you think you should or not, you are going to have to go out there after 1 hour Whether you set a watch alarm, a cell phone alarm, doesn't matter to me, but you are going to have to take it upon yourself to go out to that shop after 1 hour and ask the technician what's going on. Where are we at right now? Because your responsibility is to call the customer after 1 hour. If the technician gets 2 hours or 3 hours into a diagnosis, or heaven forbid more, you're not getting paid for that time. You're not going to be able to go back to the customer and say, well, we have 3 hours into this diagnosis now. I told you an hour, but it's another $160. No, it doesn't work like that, does it? So take it upon yourself to go out and talk to the technician after that 1 hour and say, where are we at? If you need to sell the customer more time, great. But get enough knowledge from the technician that you can impart that knowledge to the customer so they understand why they need to buy an additional hour for diagnostic time. Check engine light diagnosis, pull the codes for free, upsell 1 hour of diagnostic time based on what those codes are, check with the technician after that 1 hour, and be sure to return the customer's phone call after that 1 hour. You call them back after 1 hour, it sends a very important message. Even if you have no knowledge to give them, it sends them the message that you're good to your word. You said 1 hour and you called them after 1 hour. Okay? Keep that in mind. So, accurate estimates are really based on knowledge. Based on your current knowledge, here's what we believe we need for parts and labor to fix your vehicle. Check engine light diagnosis, upsell 1 hour. Next, we're going to be talking about the final, last step in the service write-up process. Stay tuned. Now, the final last step in the customer write-up process, or really the final step in the exceptional customer service experience, the base of the pyramid, is vehicle delivery. It's a step that too often I think we see as getting the vehicle out of here, because really the hard work on our part's done, right? We did an awesome job writing up the customer, we greeted them, we engaged them, we collected great information. The technicians did their job, they diagnosed or they performed the work. We did the upsell job, we imparted knowledge, we built a relationship with the customer, maybe we're at trust now, and the customer bought the work, and we did it, and now we're done. Now we just got to get the vehicle out of here. Except that, think about this, to a customer, the vehicle delivery is the most painful part of the whole process. This is where it all comes to a head, right? This is where you have to separate them from their money. That can be painful. So don't ever overlook the vehicle delivery process. That very, very last step in this whole experience, in the whole write-up process, is very critical. It can make or break the whole experience. Easily make or break the whole experience. All right? Now, one thing that I would strongly encourage every repair shop to do is that before that vehicle gets delivered, somebody, I don't care who it is, somebody should be test driving that vehicle. You've got to. You do not want the customer test driving that vehicle for you. That's your job, not theirs. If there's a problem with the vehicle after the repair, whether it's a burning oil smell or a wheel falling off, I want to find it. I don't want my customer finding it. Somebody should test drive that vehicle. You will greatly reduce your customer comebacks and you will greatly increase your customer satisfaction if somebody in your organization test drives that vehicle before that vehicle goes back to the customer. Other things that you need to consider on vehicle delivery. When the customer comes in to pay the invoice, have the invoice pre-printed and ready for them, especially for Quadrant 1 customers, right? That want convenience and fast, easy transactions. So pre-print the invoice. When you present the invoice to them, give them as much or as little information as they need on the invoice. If it's me, don't talk to me about the invoice. I'm very Quadrant 1. I've already given you the okay to do the work. I don't need you going through that invoice line by line. I trust that you did your job. Now let me go do my job. I'm just going to pay my bill and go. Quadrant 3 or 2 or 4, they need some explanation. Quadrants 2 and 4, they need bullet points. Quadrant 3, they're going to want line by line. So have the invoice pre-printed and give the customer as much or as little information as they want in order for them to understand what they're paying for. Now, even more important than that is this is where you have to create perceived value. Remember that scenario I had about buying a TV and you can go home and plug it in and watch it if you spend the money on the TV? But if you take the same money and you buy tires and alignment on your vehicle, you drive home and best case you don't notice anything, worst case you have a shimmy in the steering wheel. You have to remind the customer of what they bought, what value there was in their purchase. And if they just purchased tires and alignment, remind them that they've got a safe vehicle now. You're going to love the performance of this vehicle. The wet weather performance is going to be enhanced. You're much safer on the road, or you've got better traction in the snow, whatever it may be. But remind them of the value they just purchased for that money. Because they're about to give you a pile of money, and they may or may not ever perceive value unless you remind them of it. So make sure, pre-print the invoice, explain the invoice, and remind them of the value that they have just purchased. Now, when they walk out to that vehicle, think about where the vehicle is parked. If you're in a metro area, if you can deliver the vehicle to the door, that might be really awesome for that customer. If you're in a snow area, an area where it snows, you know, the upper Midwest or the Northeast or you know, out in the West, you might consider sending somebody out, brushing the vehicle off, and delivering it to the door. There are independent stores as well as dealerships that have somebody that delivers vehicles to the door full time. That's their job. So that that customer doesn't have to wade out through the snow, brush off their car, and jump in it and go. It's delivered right to the door. So think about that. At the very least, please inform the customer where the vehicle is parked. There's nothing worse than a customer paying their bill, collecting their keys and their invoice, walking out that door, and standing out in the parking lot, looking around, wandering around, wondering where the car is. Help them. Let them know where their vehicle is if you can't deliver it to the door. As far as the vehicle itself goes, somebody should be quality controlling that vehicle. The person that took the test drive on the vehicle should also ensure no fingerprints, that the radio is in the appropriate position, that the seat is as close as it was to where the customer had it as you can get it. And I know it's a little bit of a challenge. But the bottom line is the vehicle should be made sure that it's in the condition the customer expects it to be in. Somebody should be checking on that. Seat covers, floor mats, steering wheel covers, if you've used all that, which I sure hope you did,